I have an addiction. At least 5 times a day, I find myself going onto YouTube. That's me typing, by the way. And watching the bombardment scene from 2021's Dune. There's just something so beautiful to me about the scene. It just feels so realistic, and the sound design and the VFX are just so satisfying. It truly is breathtaking. Hi, I'm James Kenworthy, and this is a series where I recreate my old visual effects, as well as visual effects from film and TV. So today I'm going to have a go at recreating that Dune vibe. So what I want to do for this is to have me standing on this platform overlooking this big alien terrain. And then far in the distance there'll be this big ship. Then out of nowhere there'll be this missile or laser that comes down from the sky, and I'll be like, huh? And then it goes when it hits the other ship. That's the idea anyway. I wanted to film myself entirely on a green screen, so I decided to film indoors. I went into a darkish room with just enough light from the window to light my green screen. I then did some acting, if you can even call it that. I kind of just stare. I wanted to have a shot where you see the explosion reflected in my eyeball, so I used a small aperture light just to light up my face. Now it's time for some computer stuff. I opened my footage up in my compositor of choice, being Hitfilm Pro in this case, and made sure that I could pull a good green key off of it. And I can. Excellent. Okay, Blender time. Man opens up Blender. What happens next will shock you. I delete the default cube, and the light, and the camera. I created a landscape using Blender's built-in landscape tool, and then textured it using True Terrain, which is a really awesome Blender add-on. Making sure to have the Ant landscape add-on enabled, I went Shift-A, Mesh, Landscape. Under Operator Presets, I selected Large Terrain. Made the mesh size a bit bigger, and increased the subdivisions to make it nice and detailed. Nice. I then hit S30 to scale it up by 30. I then gave it some nice rocky materials in True Terrain. I lit the scene using a basic sky texture within Blender, bringing the sun elevation down and increasing the ozone so it has a nice early nighttime look. For the fog, I made a big cube and covered my terrain with it, placing it over the parts that I would want to be foggy. I added a principled volume shader to the cube and gave it some really low density and emission until I got a look that I liked. I then set up my first camera angle and used the keyed footage of me as the background image of the camera, but brought it to the front. Once I was happy with my camera angle, I brought in this big spaceship I got from productioncrate.com. I chucked the ship far back in my scene and into the fog. I added a cylinder and scaled it to fit into the engine of my ship. I also parented it to the ship so it would move and rotate with it. I gave the cylinder a blue emission material so it would light up the engines. I then disabled the cylinder from the camera view, which hides the actual cylinder object from our scene, but keeps the light on the engine. I then just did a really basic animation for the ship, just having it fly forward really slowly. I rendered it all out as an image sequence and brought it into Hitfilm for compositing. I gave the CG layer some slight blur just to take any harsh edges off it. I used some curves on myself to darken the shot up to make it blend in with the landscape. I then used a camera lens blur to make it look like I was the one out of focus. And then applied some grain to it all to make it look like it was really filmed at night. And last but not least, I just chucked some camera shake into the mix just to take any static edges off of it. It's looking pretty cool. Next up, for this shot here, I just simply brought in a point light, increased the intensity and animated it towards the ship. And that's it. Since the point light illuminates the fog as it passes through it, there is no need to create an actual object for the laser. All I needed was the one light. And as I said earlier, I wanted a shot where you'd see the explosion in my eyeballs. So for that, I found an aerial explosion that I liked off of Action VFX, tracked my eyeballs, put the explosion in them, blurred them, and made them glow. Now, since my footage is darkened to look like night, you couldn't see my face light up anymore. So I duplicated my footage and masked the top one just around my face and gave it a lot of feather. I then removed the color grading from it and keyframe the layer's opacity to increase when the explosion happens. Now, for this final shot here, I just recorded myself in the hallway, trying to do one of those cool poses. And this is clearly an area that I could improve on. I used the Runway AI rotoscoping tool to mask me out. Then, using a cylinder, I made that little platform for me to stand on. I simply scaled the cylinder down to make a little disc. I textured it with some metal panels from Production Crate. And yes, it looks extremely dumb when you look at it from other angles, so don't do that. For the explosion, I imported in the same aerial explosion, letting it emit light. I did this by enabling the import images as planes add-on. I then keyframed the same light to increase as the explosion happens. Then within Hitfilm, I added a lens flare to make this big and beautiful flash effect. Some lens dirt was also added to exaggerate the brightness of the flash. And then once it was all edited together, we get this. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'm off to watch Oppenheimer now, so goodbye.